a number of people in the room actually have looked at the Auckland guidelines, which has actually been developed down there. What they've done there, they've actually got a double approach. They've got a body of evidence, which actually does that, and actually looks at the existing data that's there and does an assessment of it. The interesting thing talking to them is that they haven't yet got I don't think that you've yet got a device fully through that process. And then the next level up is to actually go through a testing protocol. So that's the sort of steps.
Yeah, well, I'm from Auckland, so I can talk on the protocol. It was an interesting development of that protocol because they selected pieces from a number of different protocols around the world and pulled them together. So that was an interesting approach because by doing that, they made a protocol that was pretty much impossible because of the way they approached. They were also trying to relate land use to contaminant generation, which they thought was standardised. This motorway would produce this sort of contaminant characterisation. They found that was highly variable as well. So that's the paradigm they're at, is that it's not as linear as we think it is. It's not as simple and straightforward.
So it's not being used yet.
Well, no, it is used. They're trying to scratch their head out how to do the second iteration.
Okay.
Certain devices that put their data in have a right to continue using their data, using their product.
But I think the example's good if you can set it up right.
It was a great step, and we were pushing for that in New Zealand for a long time, saying, look, we need to standardise our approach, not only in testing, but also our evaluation. It's okay to have a testing protocol, but now how are we going to evaluate it? If we have different peer reviewers, they could interpret the data differently. So this was not only protocols for testing, but how it was to be evaluated. And it also went into the operational side as well, and with a more of a subjective measure.
Right.
Tony, and I'll take that.
Just in terms of an interim process, you've got to ask yourself, what is the evidence being put forward? At the moment, I can probably think of 3 or 4 systems that are represented on here where there has actually been independent peer-reviewed data. Darren, you did that HumeScepter work years ago. The CDS stuff that was done by Robin Ellison and Tracy Walker in Melbourne. There was the work that's been done by Stormwater 360. I think there was some stuff that EcoSol did, I think, at some stage. There is probably only around 4 or 5 reports that have actually been out there in the literature. They give you an indication of performance. So when you see another device come along, Envis, that was the other one that had work done by Manish. When you see something new come along, you've got to go back and say, well, compare it to what has been published, what is available publicly, that has been peer-reviewed. Are these similar-looking devices? I would expect similar performance. When we were setting up the music modelling guidelines, one of the things we had was the CDS monitoring that Robin had done, and showed that up to 75 milligrams per litre there was no removal, and above 75 milligrams per litre we got 70% removal of TSS. There was an established scientifically defensible process that said for screening devices we think this is how they work, and that's been verified by the monitoring of the BCC and others have done. If you get presented a new device, go back and look at that literature and say, is it operating similar to these other devices in literature? If not, then you've got to say, well, present me the independent peer-reviewed data, because without that, you've got no other basis other than what the manufacturer is telling you.
What's this? Question from Darren.
Just a comment from the operational sector in the United States. Yes, I can understand that the history of the debate here in Australia is that competitors aren't able to agree, but they're also the best checker, the best peer reviewer. So the example of SWIMA in the States, one of the members of that submitted their report to that panel, and the panel refused. And they said, no, go away, start again. So before the panel is prepared to verify the results, they have to cross all those hurdles. Now, the members of that panel are then equally subject to the same scrutiny. So either everyone passes or everyone fails, or everyone's fair. So what the panel would need to do in this case would be go through all of those existing reports, whether they be lab or whatever, and go through to a relevant standard, whether it's a BNP database standard, whether it's an Auckland standard, and tick against those boxes and say, yes, we accept that, or this pollutant, but maybe not that one, or I'm sorry you don't cross the hurdles on, for example, number of events, statistical robustness.
Right, so a comment from David Simpson from Brisbane City Council.
David Simpson, Brisbane City Council. I'd just like to make a point about field testing and preparation of peer-reviewed papers. If the data doesn't include information on rainfall intensities, duration, totals,
Absolutely right.
And also average recurrence intervals or AFs, and also information on flows, the actual flows through the advisory, then I think the information is either meaningless or in fact misleading.
100% correct.
Anything? Question or comment? Yeah, Jeremy.
Jeremy Brown at Stormwater 360. It's really a comment for the manufacturers, and this is something that we need to be aware of. We've got a duty of care. The elephant in this room is the claims that our salespeople are out there making. We went through a regulatory process recently where they brought the SPPs to one single planning policy here, and we're very, very close to government chucking it out because of the delay at the development application process, because of this confusion between manufacturers. Now, we actually have a duty of care not to stretch the truth, to try and go in there on that job and say, oh, my device does 50% of this, my device does 60%, just to try and get it sale. Confuses the hell out of people at DA, slows the process down, and in turn, government look at our industry and they laugh at it and go, why are we doing this? So, one of the things I like manufacturers to get together is to make sure that what we're doing out in the field is representative of what we're talking about here. So, if my device does this, that's all it does. If it doesn't, well then don't put it in and waste builders' time, waste DA application resources. So maybe that's one thing we can get a commitment from out of the manufacturers at the end of the day. Cheers.
Really good point, Jeremy.
So we've got friggin' engineering departments that do that.
Do any manufacturers dispute that they make potentially false claims?
We're not allowed, Brad, we're not allowed to.
Okay.
Trade practices says we're not allowed to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Enforces that though?
Trade practices enforce it, well, particularly with the two big boys they do. Every one of our staff in the big companies undergoes trade practices training once a year. Everybody. At huge cost, because we have to be aware of it. You are absolutely right. We can't mislead. The problem is, it comes to the point of what is misleading. What's your point of definition? Does it remove 30% of debris? Well, what's 30%? How long is a piece of string relative to what? Is it the right size on the catchment? Is it has it been modelled correctly?
It's represented as an average reduction.
But everything performs differently based on the catchment that it's in. That's what I'm saying. You can't have a general statement across the whole industry saying that does or doesn't.
But are your salespeople making general statements about?
Our salespeople, we don't let our salespeople make general statements because we're not allowed to.
If I go on the various websites of some of the proprietary device companies, they do make claims on their website.
I think you'll find there'll be very general claims.
I'm not sure if they are general claims. I think they're quite specific.
Well, if you think there's misleading on there, you're entitled to take that up with them. Well, if you think they're not realistic, you're entitled to take them up with them and say they're not realistic, but be very specific with why you think they're not realistic.
So what the industry needs to go by is we come back to this panel of people who assess all the proprietors' data and they publish it on the Stormwater Australia website and say that's what it does. So if a consultant gets a brochure that says it does XYZ removal rate, they go and check that website, and if it doesn't correspond to the website, they go by the Stormwater Australia website, not by the manufacturer's brochure.